Regrettably, we're almost at the end of our Irish cinema celebration, but if I may, I would like to talk with you about witchcraft today. And no, not the kind that you were accustomed to in Los Angeles or other elite cities. For true witchcraft is not born out of yearning for a cool rebrand on Catholicism. And I know that the pedophilia, has probably turned a lot of people off to the whole thing, and rightfully so, but the similarities are barely there. The wellness folk and the mentally ill people who gleefully call themselves descendants of the women who couldn't be burned in Salem are blind. They're blinded by the fact that Catholicism, too, has altars, candles, chants, rituals, pageantry, and your practice is, much more influenced by the modern Catholic Church than any true form of paganism, of which we will later explore, because you will be appalled by the true version of what you profess to follow. The manifestation is simply prayer. Anecdotes that explain why your magic isn't working is the same for why God is not answering in the way that you expect. Place God with the universe, spirit, whatever you want, and it's the same logic, the same cognitive dissonance. The aesthetic is cool, I'll give them that. Catholicism has given us some of our greatest works of art. And Catholicism has a real shame to it, which I love. A high guilt complex would be a healthy thing for our society to have. But no matter what you believe, you are wrong. For true magic is vindictive and violent. It's the law of the street. It's getting to know your environment so well you can manipulate it to your will. Studying, creeping silently through the darkness of each soul, for a true witch must know sorrow, anguish, rejection. Collectivism is about exploring, without judgment, the darkest parts of our nature. A sinister grip upon your mind, for there is so much overwhelming pain in the collective thought. A practitioner simply needs to be pushed to unleash the hell henceforth trapped within. This is why I do think sometimes men are better at it than women. I learned a great deal from my time working in the prison system. Oh, powerful life lessons that have so forth never done me wrong. And I do believe that violence can be very well the answer to many of life's ills. As an adult, of course, it's embarrassing and distasteful behavior with severe consequences, but in other contexts, well, it is pretty useful. So, take for instance bullying, all right? Like, there's no cure for bullying on the schoolyard. To this, I think we can all agree. You're getting bullied as an adult, you likely deserve it, so I'm not going to even dignify you with any sort of response. But for children, there's no great resolution. In the school, they're told to avoid or ignore. Then in 5 years, none of this is even going to matter. But I think, like, we forget to put ourselves into the mind of a child. Like, of course, it's true. In 5 years, it isn't going to matter. But as a child, it's like as an adult, 5 years, that's a blink of an eye. As a kid, some of these kids are no older than one decade, a single decade, which 5 years is a significant period of time. And each day they grow more desperate, which is highly unacceptable to me. So when I worked at the school district, I worked at many different sites. Some of them, physical violence was not a viable option because I would be sending these kids into a knife or gunfight with simply their fists. So in those places, if I sent them into like a schoolyard fight, they'd end up hospitalized or worse. So in those situations, you can take them down psychologically, but it's a very difficult art for children to fully master. So sometimes in those instances, it's kind of just best to run from your issues, be homeschooled, and hope you even out socially in college. But in middle class districts, well, physical violence is the only answer. So in one of these districts, I was seeing a sensitive boy, not a mother boy, mind you, who should have been shamed out of the behavior, but just a, run of the mill sensy boy. and he was being bullied by a puka-shelled terror. Sometimes he'd even wear a shark's tooth necklace, which was absolutely absurd. He had no business doing it because he lacked the aura. And this kid's favorite pastime, the little puka-shelled, ridiculously shark tooth necklace kid. So his favorite pastime was, making faces at everything that was sincere. He didn't like when I let the boys do like one wrestling move on the big beanbag chairs. I mean, behind my supervisor's back. I was like, all right, she's out. Do one. Okay. One stone cold stunner. That's it. But the people's elbow was never allowed because I was like, none of you have the aura to do it. You don't have the charisma. None of you are the people's champion. So don't even attempt it. But like a stunner or whatever, it's fine. Just do it real fast. One, only one. And this kid, he would just sit there with his little snide remarks and his little snorting and whatever. And he hated when I let the anime kids draw their little characters on the board, or when like girls would do like choreographed dances. All the women are going to know what I mean by this. When you're younger, you just choreograph dances. It's something that you do. Um, you know, I think these were from a thing called like Zombie High Tie or something. I don't know what it was actually called. I think I'm mixing like their thing with Summer High Tie. I don't know, but yeah, they do these choreographed dances. And he was such a joyless kid. He was such a joyless kid. I hated him. He would bring salads for lunch, and he would like just look at disdain at all the kids eating Pizza Hut, or candy, and he was like, empty calories? You're 12. Like, how about like, do you know that your soul is empty? Like, I hated this kid. Everyone did. Okay, because it's like there's no reason for a 12-year-old to be acting like some middle-aged man twice divorced that got scammed by NFTs. And he would pick on my client, right? Just like with this very smug attitude, especially when he would play his Nintendo Switch and like, other boys would gather around, they'd watch, discuss strategy, things like that. Of course, this kid, he despised violent video games, the best kind, by the way. And, he couldn't even find cheer in something as innocuous as Mario Kart. And so once again, he'd be over there making the snide comments, getting his little harem to like giggle at stuff that was exceptionally unfunny, by the way. I just want to point that out, that the middle school era is probably one. I think that there is never another time in your life where you are at your most unfunny. So nothing this kid ever said should ever elicit any sort of laughter. Um, but he was constantly just trying to bait my client into like humiliation rituals, things like that. And it really took a toll on my client. Obviously, he's getting bullied. He was even homeschooled for a time, got real bad, and then one day we're at a session and he mentions like, you know what I would really love to do is punch that kid straight in the throat. And I was like, oh, after all this time doing clinical work with you, this is exactly where I wanted to get you. Finally, you've arrived. I mean, look, it's not something that I can exactly put on a treatment plan, but yeah, you need to punch this kid. You need to do it. And you need to do it like let me just say, you need to punch this kid, but you need to not just punch him, okay? You need to punch him good. You need to embarrass him in a way where homeschooling becomes his only solace from ridicule. And if I've learned anything from working in the prison system, this was absolutely key. That's what you had to do. You had to do it in front of everyone. You had to hit him so hard he pissed his pants. Okay, I mean that's not exactly what they said in the prison, but I was tailoring it for a middle school audience. Um, but first I had to teach this kid how to throw a punch, like thumb out, the power is really gonna come from your like lower body, it's not really gonna come from your forearm, blah 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 blah, so forth and so on. We threw on like cool clips of John Claude Van Damme, we really had to like build his confidence, really cement the inspiration. Um, and one day, just doing admin work in my office, plops down, it's like, guess what? holds up his swollen knuckles and lets me know I neglected to tell him that it would hurt so bad. But I was like, look, I didn't want to psych you out, dude. I knew if I told you, you'd probably chicken out or you might not do it hard enough. And I needed you to do it exceptionally hard, not just for yourself, but also I was living vicariously through it. Um, so, I was just like, but here's the thing. After he said that, I was like, look, man, I couldn't. But then it was like, dude, get on in here. We're exchanging high fives. I'm like, dude, I'm so proud of you, until I could like kind of like see like my supervisor, shuffling outside of my door. And then I had to be like, this is appalling behavior. It is unacceptable. And you are gonna need probably a month, I would say, of lunch detentions in my very office, is what I would suggest. So of course it's like that's what he did. I allowed him to use his phone, playing his Nintendo Switch. His dad brought him McDonald's every day with the McFlurry too. And then I actually like guilted his father into bringing me fries because I was like, I had to teach your son how to throw a punch, dude. So that's a little bit embarrassing on your side. So like we can just make up with it. I will keep silent. But you will have to buy that from me with McDonald's fries. So he did, and it was great because you want to know how the story ends? That boy was never bothered another day among those halls, and that puka-shelled bitch avoided him. And you know what the thing is too? You know something I noticed? He never wore shark's tooth necklace again either. Oh, his spirit was quiet. Oh, he got knocked down a peg. Exactly what we wanted. But the moral of the story is, is that I might be a monster. But no, this is the true moral of the story. That's power, baby. That's resolution. That's the dream. It works so well, well, might as well be magic. Which is certainly the theme in the two I have for you tonight. The Outcasts that came out in 1982 with The Witch that came out in 2015. Which when I looked that up, I was like, holy shit, did that come out over 10 years ago? Oh, God. Time is nothing but a flat circle. Anyway, The Outcast is a beautiful Irish folk fantasy that was once considered a lost classic. It's recently given a restored release a couple years ago, and let us be thankful that it did. So it follows this outcast girl, hence the name, or woman. It's really impossible to know. She's definitely socially, if not mentally, delayed. So, she's like treated like a child, even though she's probably well into womanhood. Um, But you'll definitely find the film's influences throughout Irish cinema. Obviously, heavily in the two Irish horrors that I discussed in my previous Devils. Um, but Mara has a very distinct stamp on characters that I featured last year. Of course, I'm referring to both Dominic and Mrs. McCormick in The Banshees of Inisherin. And then the she even make an appearance. Of course, during a wedding scene. So they come in playing their fiddles and shit. And Moore even meets one of these figures named Scarf Michaels. He is he has this magic fiddle that causes all sorts of demonic visions and ruins the sexual exploits of Mara's enemies. And it gets the extra stamp of approval from me because there is some old man loving it. All right. We do sexualize old men in this, which I loved. And, it was just like, it's this very good vibe of like, he's old in age, but he's virile and, the spirit of a youthful trickster. He really is. It's really hot. Obviously very erotic. But we even get some romance in there too, borrowing from Frank Capra. Scarf captures a piece of the moon from Mara, and of course our hearts are sealed whether you're a fellow freak who sexualizes old men or not. You will certainly fall in love with this rascal. I mean, his name is Scarf after all. You gotta love that. Um, so it takes place in rural early famine Ireland. And there's abject poverty, there's starvation, which is a perfect recipe for a magical escape from the surrounding stark realism. Hardships of life, the monotony of hunger, the exhausting physical nature of everyday life, early divides forming, between Catholic laborers and Protestant landowners. The landscapes, although beautiful, often shrouded in bleak tones or overlaid in a thick haze. Magic becomes a natural outlet for more as she becomes more ostracized. The power of Scarf's fiddle, the diddling they do in the woods, it's certainly unbecoming to the town folk, even though this could not be further from the truth, because after all, Scarf can write quite a catchy ditty. I mean, you're gonna dance a little Irish jig to these. I loved them. I did it. I will say it drove Bugley into a frenzy. But and you know what? It did sometimes drive the town folk into frenzy. Like he'd play and they'd be like plagued. They would go mad with these visions, and sometimes they would be having a great time, doing a little Celtic jig and whatnot. But yeah, no, it drove Bugley into a frenzy of which I've never seen before. I was just sitting up here, with my feet up. Just I didn't even want to put my feet on the ground. I was terrified. Because like the town folk, Bugley's like, this is dirty business, and I don't care for it. And the town folk was like, this is not a time to be fancy free. Okay, this is like, but I feel like this is what truly separates the Irish from the British. We would rather die than go through life with a stiff upper lip. We must feel, we must express ourselves, we must give action to our large emotions. Repression is the disease of thy soul. But the town, well, they reject her family becoming her greatest detractors. Scar fears for her because if she wants to embrace this supernatural lifestyle, I mean, there's no going back. She will become like him, a wanderer cursed with all these feelings, with nowhere to go. As resilient and tenacious as her homeland, she perseveres. She fully engulfs herself in the nuanced world of the other side. She opens herself to the powers henceforth unknown. Becomes a tale of immersing oneself in the new, even when filled with sorrow and regret at the old she must leave behind. It is a dream, or is it a nightmare? Or does mysticism truly fill the liminal space in between the gaps of our reality? So the witch is somehow an even bleaker look at rural family life. Of course, stylized to perfection by our very own Robert Eggers. Um, and if the tone and landscapes feel rugged and unsurvivable in the Outcasts, 1600s New England is truly unforgiving. Family must leave their settlement and make it on their own, make it on their own, even further remote than their once small town. Starvation is imminent. Death bides its time. A baby kidnapped under the care of the eldest daughter, Thomas, taken by a witch to be used as key ingredient for something nefarious, I'm sure. There's Black Phillip, who is talking to now the youngest kids and generally just creeping everybody out. He's great. I love BP. He's my favorite part of it, and I would love to have him as a pet. I'd love to invite him into my home. And I'd love to throw a birthday party if he's interested. But I'm not sure if like the goat was a very talented actor or goats are just generally like that. They have these very wide black eyes that are just generally pretty creepy, but whatever. VP is really superb. I love Black Phillip. He is such he's such a light in all this, even though he is a conduit for evil. But that's what we love about him. That's what we love about BP. Um, but throughout the film, the dread becomes palpable, as thick as the briar in Satan's church. Family goes on various hunting expeditions to look for the witch, and the mother further descends into a nasty, useless wraith, as mothers do, don't they? And another child gets taken, returns only to bear the telltale signs of possession by witchcraft. The kids that are communing and talking with Black Phillip develop a lot of nerve, honestly, to start accusing their older sister Thomasin of being the witch. But of course, the parents agree because they're as unforgiving as the miserable landscape. It's like, oh yeah, she's got to be sent out for money and our safety. Quite honestly, let's get rid of this bitch. Um, so of course, from there, it's not too long for the whole household becomes an orgy of blood. Such tragedy begets such violence. It becomes a young woman's only self-defense. The ties that bind becoming a noose. The blood that bonds poisoning the heart. Until a certain power forms. The witch cautions us not to fetishize adversity, but instead the madness that it brings. Wouldst thou like to live deliciously? Ah, oh, BP. We love you, buddy. Mwah. The visuals, the acting, the absolute psychotic attention to historical detail. Oh, such a wonderful journey to endure. There's something very exceptional about the Irish American intersectionality between these two, because as I've said before, and I will say again wholeheartedly, the Irish culture has been bastardized through Ellis Island. We have been stripped naked and beaten from our heritage by the American machine. But dare I say, our fields of barley have yet a little bloom, never fully trampled under the boots of oppression. Violence may be a universal language, but also art themed by the strings of a fiddle. Allow our voice to ring out internationally, generationally, creating and influencing disturbing and yet lovely expressions that nothing but a moving picture could fully explore. United in subjugation, united in horror, united in pain. I'll be back in a couple of days with my final double for this month, a tension-filled Irish language thriller, an American pulp. But have an enchanting time with these two, and I'll see you in the next one.